Good evening and good morning, and probably good afternoon, depending on who's watching where.
Technologist podcast with Coach Dennis, number 3. Casey, welcome.
Hi, I'm Casey. Thanks so much for having me.
Casey.
It is streaming. I just heard my own voice.
Awesome.
All right, we're live.
What is it you'd like people to know about?
Well, I've got an interesting fact from this past weekend that I think is pretty topical. I was at an improv festival and we won Best in Show. My partner and I and our friend, we did Baby Shark, and I played the accordion and I was dancing around. And we got the crowd to dance. And it was even like a Rickroll. We made them think they were just humming. We made the crowd hum with us. And then they were humming a part of Baby Shark and they didn't know. So it was a lot of fun. It was like random fact about me. And if you can't see the video, I have an accordion in the background. It's in my chair where I practice. It's just a little bit about me.
To what degree is you playing the accordion, Casey, and versus rehearsed song?
Oh yeah. I take inspiration from there's this guy, the tambourine guy, who plays in Postmodern Jukebox, and he just comes on stage and just plays tambourine and is like smiling and dancing and moving around. And I feel like a lot of kinship with this guy. I feel like that's the kind of person I want to be on stage, just have a lot of energy and explode out. And it was an improv festival, so a lot of it was kind of unplanned. The three of us were just comfortable making stuff. Oh yeah, now you all dance with us. Like, we didn't say we would say that. It's kind of nice. Improv is something I'm just getting into this year. And the more I let myself just say the first thing that comes to mind, the more I feel like it's me shining through. It's not rehearsed much at all.
When you say improv, are we talking improvisation on stage? Is it musical improvisation, a combination?
Yeah, my favorite is musical improv. But to get good at that, I also do like regular improv a little bit to learn those skills.
And that's more comedic or drama?
Yeah, comedy.
Comedy.
Well, generally comedy. Yeah.
You seem to be pretty comfortable on stage now on the stream. Is that something you worked on? Is that something who you are naturally?
Oh yeah. As a kid, I was not good at public speaking at all. And my mom really wanted me to. And I don't know, I got a lot of practice, maybe against my will, getting put into situations where I had to. And eventually I learned. Now I've been in front of people so much. Like, I've been a teacher full-time for a while, and I've given talks at a lot of conferences. I've been keynote a couple times. And I'm just like very comfortable on stage. That's true. But it took practice. I think maybe my favorite trick to be comfortable on stage is picking one person in the audience that seems happy with what you're saying and doing and thinking you're performing just for them, specifically that one person.
That's great. But it sounds like that was a hard lesson.
Yeah. It took a lot of practice.
Do you practice these things consciously? Do you go with the flow? How much mental effort is there?
I think I used to have to spend more effort, and now it's more automatic. Like, even the inflections in my voice, I'm not thinking about whether I rise my tone or drop my tone, but I know I used to be more monotone when I was more nervous as a child. And now it just kind of goes up and down, and it's subconscious now. This reminds me of like the 4 stages of learning a skill. Do you know, like unconscious, conscious, and all of those?
Unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetent, consciously competent, and unconsciously competent.
I have a knock at the door. I don't know who it could be. Excuse me a sec. I'm back.
For everybody just tuning in, we started a little bit early, and Casey just came back from something from the universe knocking on his door.
Yeah, well said. We're getting the wasps removed from my balcony. And they just wanted permission to come inside and do it. Like, great.
Great. Casey, you're a book author, psychologist, specializing in neuroscience, I believe, and you're also a software engineer.
That's right.
That seems to be a very unintuitive combination. And from my experience, there's always a lot of personality coming out to connect those two that results in emergent creativity or emergent behavior. What was that part, that emergence of combining these three together for you?
Oh, good question. I guess I forget about my psychology background a lot of the time because I take it for granted. I studied psychology at Yale University, neuroscience, and I learned a lot of stuff there that I think everybody knows, but nobody knows usually because they didn't study psychology. And then as a software developer, I would do things like, I don't know, document things for onboarding for the team, which is what people needed, and things like that. Very people-centered, people-oriented tasks. And other people are like, how did you think to do that, engineer Casey? It's like, I don't know. It's my other headspace coming in. And
So
especially as a manager, as a product manager, and as an engineering manager, those people skills and understanding how people work really helped me connect and attune to the people around me and be more effective in those roles.
it sounds like you had an untraditional route through the software ladder. Did you go straight to engineering manager? Did you start as a dev? Was there?
I started as a developer and then to engineering manager. I feel like I did UX the entire time. I took HCI, Human Computer Interaction course, before UX was a term in the industry. It's only like 10, 15 years old,
Yeah,
UX.
it's very fresh.
And so like learning programming, I didn't even learn software development in undergrad. I took maybe one class. I learned a little bit in middle school and high school. I took a community college class, but it was so boring, I hated it. And eventually I had an internship in undergrad that happened to have programming, one in the neuroscience lab, one in the IT department, and I was doing actually useful things. And then I started enjoying programming because I was really helping people.
To what degree did psychology to helping people, debugging your brain, which is what your book is called, to what degree did all of that nuance that is very much from a different field, industry, impact your career as an engineering manager, technologist, UX person?
Yeah, I guess I want to call out the other direction some too. By being a software developer, I got really comfortable designing systems and thinking about systems in that way. And so I took the model cognitive behavioral therapy that we covered in undergrad a whole lot. And then I put that into more discrete terms like input, output, and process in the middle, and all of these like systems modeling terms. And so putting them together makes it really accessible, not just for technologists, but for non-technologists. Like the technology metaphors are simple enough that they follow it, and they think they know a little bit more about computers now too. And that's another plus reading that book.
So I have a quick reference of your book in front of me, and there's something interesting there to me, which pops out immediately, which is called, in the context of experience processing techniques, which I think we opened the door on just now. What does it mean to expand your emotional vocabulary?
Oh, good question. So most people you understand probably 100 emotion words, 200 maybe. Like if somebody says, I'm feeling, I don't know, blasé, most people are like, sure, blasé. But how many people actually say that day to day? So the ones that you use to describe yourself are way fewer, maybe 10, 20, 30. And if we can tap into the potential of using more of those words to describe our feelings, we become more aware and more attuned with our own feelings. And that helps us be more comfortable with ourselves and interact with the feelings, like debugger, breakpoint, manipulate the local variables and see what's in there. It helps us like see what's going on. And so it takes practice to start using more emotional vocabulary terms. And it really helps to have a reference, like the circle of emotions is a really popular one. My favorite is if you look at the quick reference, there's like some links in some of those documents. One of them goes to the Wikipedia page, emotion classification, which I really like. There's one that's like a tree diagram. So you're like, okay, joy in general, not angry, not the other ones. And then from joy, you go to a second tier, more specific one, and then you can go to a third tier, more specific one. And then one of those might be specifically how you're feeling right now, dejected, instead of just like bad. And if you can get that kind of nuance, it helps you understand yourself and communicate with others and interact with your thoughts and feelings.
Is that a read-only process? Like, is that just analysis? Because it's a loaded question, because I heard once that you can only, maybe this was a sort of guru quote, but I heard that you can only experience those emotions for which you have words for. And so putting that together with what you just said, it implies, or at least I think, I have this gut feeling that perhaps having a vocabulary would essentially influence what we're feeling by understanding, having a better vocabulary. Does that in any way cause input into the being space?
Yeah. It reminded me a little bit of like the iceberg model. So you can see, we can experience consciously like 10% of our mind and 90% is hidden. Like a subconscious, we're not aware of it. We can't put it to
Hidden
words.
to us, or
To
hidden
us.
to the mind.
Yeah. There's most of our brain's processes are subconscious. It's like it's in a code base we don't have access to. We don't even know what's going on. There's no log statements. There's no tracing. We don't know what's happening.
I like that analogy.
And so if we get more vocabulary, that 10% might go up a little bit more, or maybe it was just 5, maybe you get 5.1% because now you're aware of a little bit more. So you can consciously be aware of that experience. So I guess I would say you're experiencing it even in the 90%, the hidden part. You're experiencing it subconsciously at least, but you're not consciously experiencing it by definition, by what we're saying. And so becoming more aware of more experiences, then you can, I don't know, have a better understanding of yourself and choose what to do better, react to things better. But it does take time and energy and effort. So it makes sense people didn't naturally do it. And it's a skill most people haven't developed. And we can work on it. It's a learnable skill.
It seems that you did a lot of learning of the skills, teaching of how to learn it, and also applying it to a software or at least technology implementation. Can you share a little bit more about that journey, about how does all this tie into the technology background, the output of
so let's imagine I'm like an engineering manager coaching an engineer employee, and they're having a conflict with a teammate, maybe the product manager or designer. That happens a lot. Like the designer just doesn't understand that we have to do it this way, and they can be maybe frustrated and have heightened emotions and not be listening to the other person. It's all very natural. It happens a lot. Every team has this happening. It's maybe, I don't know, monthly, yearly, at least some amount it happens. And if the person can become more aware of their own thoughts and feelings enough to articulate it to themselves, then they can feel more settled on it. And then the emotional, heightened emotion isn't bad, but if you can use it and wield that energy and then like lower your emotion and understand it better and feel better about it, talk to someone, talk through it, then you can choose a more deliberate response. That's the thing that I want people to learn how to do, is to like wield all of this power into choosing an appropriate response that's effective. So then instead of going into a meeting with a designer, like, you're making terrible decisions and I'm very frustrated and I want to share my feelings like this style with you out loud, very frustrated. Or you can go on and say, I see you wanted us to do A and B, and I'm talking about B and C, and we should talk about this thing more. Why do you think this? And they can approach with curiosity. So I've done that a lot, like coaching an employee, or maybe not even my employee, just coaching a peer even, how to help them think through a problem and process it and feel comfortable with it enough to choose their most effective response.
Choose rather than reacting.
Yeah,
so
right?
Automatic.
Yeah, well said. Automatic versus deliberate. That's the dichotomy I like to put out.
How does that, in a business world where there are, let's say, OKRs connected directly to customer success, how do you bridge the gap between well-being, retention rate, employee retention, happiness, some kind of happiness index? How do you tie in what you would traditionally call happiness metrics from HR to customer success business metrics? Is there a correlation there?
Yeah.
Or what's a good way to bridge the gap?
Totally. It's funny, that's also kind of the name of my company, Happy and Effective. And those two things are the ones that I want to bring out in companies. I want them to have more happy employees and more effective. And if there's like a 2x2 quadrant, it's the top corner that we want. I don't just want happy, not effective, or effective, not happy. That's not as good.
So is happiness and effectiveness orthogonal? Are they orthogonal to each other? Like you can be happy and effective, or unhappy and effective, or ineffective and happy, and ineffective and unhappy? Are
You
those
can be
all
all
possible
four
states?
are possible, yeah. But they do build on each other. If you're happier, you're probably going to be more effective. And
Okay,
there's
so there's
plenty
some
of research to
causality.
say that. And if you're more effective, you're probably going to be happier at work. But not necessarily. And if a company is pursuing only effectiveness, they couldn't achieve low happiness anyway, even though the effectiveness kind of correlates. So like they're I don't know what the like R squared value would be, but like point something there's a correlation, but it's not a complete mapping, and it's not zero either. It's some amount correlated.
But it's not direct causation. Like it's not like do
I
this
think
and
there's a factor of it, like I don't know, 5-10% that is direct causation.
So if I'm very blunt and I say there's a efficiency budget, and there's a happiness budget, and the correlation of that I will measure by calling it performance.
Sure.
How would you budget, 20-80, 50-50? How would you budget happiness versus
I love this question. Very analytical. I would have to look at the team and see how the team is doing. Some teams are a comfortable environment, but they're not performing super well necessarily. But more common I see is there's a team that's neither, and they want to be both.
It seems like from your answer that I already missed the mark, and I would love to rephrase if I may, because I got an idea. So on the budgeting of effectiveness and happiness, how much of that budget gets spent individually per team, per department, per company for each branch? Where how should it be budgeted?
Yeah.
So the question being, an example, should happiness be budgeted per person individually and effectiveness measured and budgeted per team?
Oh, I see.
Or, is there, because from your answer earlier, it all gave me a hint that maybe, emotional stuff has to be handled like bottom up, and then maybe effectiveness top down. Is there some correlation there?
That's pretty insightful, actually. Yeah. When I do like an organizational assessment and I do interviews and surveys and I'm measuring all of this, I definitely look at not just what's the average happiness. The average happiness could be very high, like I don't know, 4 out of 5 across the company. But if there's outliers,
average happiness being a self-assessment.
Yeah, self-assessment. Okay. I'm very happy at work, or I'll ask probably more nuanced questions than that feed into that, and a few of them. But I am very happy at work. And I definitely want to look at the outliers. If there's like 5% of the company answering 1, that's a big sign that something's not going well here. So the average isn't a great measure, but the distribution, you have to really think about the distribution. And then effectiveness, if we're really looking at the output, the goals, like getting more users and getting users, upsell users to buy the more expensive service or whatever those business measures, that definitely starts at the top. You're right. So then the team or the department, we can measure the effectiveness of the goals that they're trying to achieve in a more aggregate way. And measuring, I've been thinking about this lately. I'm not sure how I feel about even performance, like annual performance review of an individual. Because I don't know that one person alone can't have the impact on the company's goals directly as well. It's a team thing, really, in technology. We need the whole team. If you're missing a designer, of course, you can't be as effective as a team. So sorry, every individual, you get a worse score this year. That's not really fair. I'm not saying totally throw them out, but I think you're right. It's like top down and the other one's bottom up, happiness, bottom up. Like the variation starts on either end.
So what, if a company hires you, how do you approach, what is the business outcome? What are your guarantees that you give them? What is sort of the simple language nuance that they will get out of, paying you for helping?
So for the organizational assessment type of service that I do, I think of myself like a mirror. So the C-suite or the VP of engineering or whoever I'm working with, they know they don't see the whole picture. They know they don't know everything that's going on. So then I come in, I do the interviews with individuals, and then I use that to make the survey. so that I quantify it all, and then I write a report with recommendations. And that recommendations is the output of that. Like, given your context, I'm not just giving you the generic recommendations I would give anyone. I'm tailoring it to this organization.
It's very bespoke.
Yeah, very bespoke. And people, I get that positive feedback from people, including the employees, like, this survey was actually relevant. A lot of them are just the generic 50 questions, and you're like, this doesn't, nothing here asked us about the CI pipeline, which is our biggest problem right now.
Yeah.
Why would you survey and miss that big point, huh? So mine will like get that nuanced. If that's the big pain point on the team, I might cover that kind of thing.
So on the CI pipeline comment, I'm guessing there's this idea of, is it painful to deploy? Are handbacks annoying? Is missing a deadline a crisis? Are you arguing a lot because of architecture decisions? Things like that.
Right. And there's a lot of great best practice questions like that from the Dora DevOps report that Google owns. And so a lot of those questions that the report asks are relevant to the company too. And that, not to say that's not necessarily, I don't go in as a DevOps consultant. I could, but that's not my focus. My focus is more on the people and the organizational systems. But if that comes up, that's what I want to ask people about in the survey, the thing that's on their mind, the actual pain points.
I'm speaking a lot with, I spoke with Oshri Cohen and Jonathan Hall and other fractional CTO/DevOps personnel, now with you, professionals who are in this field, even with Ty and even with Gordon, last previous episode. All of the happiness, all of the effectiveness, productivity, happiness, the annoyances, the stress, they all, at least based on this year's lens and nuance and biases, and my personal biases, they all seem to lead towards DevOps problems.
Yeah.
So having a problem in the production pipeline, or the testing pipeline, or the QA pipeline, or just having too many silos, too many handoffs, handbacks, too many, gatekeeping in order to get the product out. What's your thoughts on that? Like, isn't it fascinating that there is this one thing, DevOps, that didn't exist 15 years ago as a concept, and now it seems to be the root cause, or at least the root lever we can pull on to fix, to improve all metrics across the organization.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's the biggest, strongest lever possible, but it's what's in like the modern zeitgeist. It's the thing people are talking about. There's a lot of stuff like the Dora DevOps report and way more. There's conferences about it. So like, it's an easier lever to know about that exists. And it's easier to pull maybe. I would say that, like a lever, using the lever metaphor.
So there's it seems like you have a list of levers in your head sorted by difficulty.
Yeah.
Can you share those?
There's a great book that I would recommend about systems change. It's by Donella Meadows, and I never get the title right. It's like Systems Thinking, or Thinking in Systems.
We'll link it in the YouTube in the description of the video, in the doodle down below.
Great book. There's like 12 different levers that Donella Meadows ranked by like how impactful they are and how often you can use them versus down to the lowest one. And so changing the organizational culture, like in terms of inclusivity, and getting people's voices heard and not shutting people down, that's a stronger lever. And that even shows up in the Dora DevOps report. They measure psychological safety as one of their measures. And that one is so powerful. And from what I'm hearing from people doing all these interviews and surveys, that's an even bigger one. But the DevOps is easy to measure. So it's very enticing to someone like a CTO or CIO. They want to measure it and then they can see the output. The culture is a little bit harder to measure. Even if I had a perfect measure, a perfect survey and measured exactly what I wanted, people don't necessarily believe that it's measuring that. But like deploy time, people are like, sure, duh, of course I believe that deploy time changed. You can measure that. It's very visible.
Pete, one of my mentors, Peter Sage, he always mentions, tangibles or intangibles. If you as a human can tell the difference, it's measurable. But it might not be easy to put on paper.
Yeah.
End quote. How do you put on paper those intangibles that by feeling, by self-assessment, you can measure, but maybe self-assessment is a too noisy, too much noise to signal as a sort of metric to carry on, to monitor in a company? How do you measure? intangibles?
So in my
What's your
social,
recommendation? I'm not looking for an absolute
sure.
truth. Just what's your recommendation? What's your
Well,
gut
when I do this
feeling?
for companies, I can tell you what I do there is
Hmm.
I do the interviews first, and then I get all of the right things to ask, and then I do a survey, and it's quantified. I know from 1 to 7 or 1 to 5, whatever I choose, how much someone agrees with a statement or not, and that's what social scientists often use. And if I need to, I can do 5 questions to get at one point if I'm not sure, and that makes it a more powerful measure. In statistics speak, it's more powerful, it's more reliable. But I don't even need to do that usually. I just need enough to point at it. The hard part is just getting other people who don't understand like the culture matters, or they think that the
Hmm.
culture is great despite the evidence, like helping them understand it and see it.
How much of that is, the root cause of the problem? So if I'm being in like a low state of consciousness where I'm being defensive and judgmental, how how do you help someone who is extremely defensive because they are, maybe tied to a yearly performance review that is individual,
Yeah.
and they are being very defensive. And it is that defensiveness that then triggers that second stage of cultural decline. How do
Mm-hmm.
you that seems like a downward spiral for that team or that individual? How do you help that
Yeah.
person without being judgmental or maybe too controlling or too invasive to their safety?
Like you probably read my website more than I thought, because that's one of my workshops, navigating defensiveness, or it's just very topical. I don't know. So the first step to helping someone feel less defensive is they have to talk to somebody who they like and trust, or the person they like and trust most, I guess, if there's very few people, the most one, and have that
Sounds like
person
that
really
would usually be a
listen.
peer
A
rather than
peer,
a
it could be a
boss.
peer, it could be their manager if they like and trust their manager, that happens, or
Mhm.
their boss's boss. I call that
Mhm.
my grand boss often.
So skip
Sometimes
level.
I can talk to the
Mhm.
grand boss about the problem if it's, especially if it's systemic and organizational, like a larger problem. But anyway, whoever, or your like partner or friends or somebody, you need to talk through it. And people who are defensive often, if they can articulate it and put it into words, like getting their thoughts and feelings into words, and then share it with someone and have the person say, that makes sense, that can help their defensiveness come way, way, way down. And that's basically what I cover in Debugging Your Brain. But then what can
So
you do if your coworker is defensive is you can help try to support them, ask them to say, come vent, you can vent to me today, come vent. Just tell me all of your thoughts and feelings, and then like work through it. And that can help someone really put their defenses down some amount.
so that's the equivalent of them having a problem and being in an environment of not being heard, not being
Mm-hmm.
seen, not being connected with.
Yeah.
So you approach so you put yourself in the, what would that role be? Negotiator or perhaps mediator. So them with the environment, you give them the space in order to feel heard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is that is your output. You help them feel heard and seen and
Right.
understood.
And then from there, this is what the CTO probably cares about more. That person can then be more effective
Can.
and they'll be
So it's
happier.
not a guarantee.
Yeah, right. It's not a guarantee.
Are there more steps here, or is this step one of many, or is it like a complex web of
Yeah.
cross-cutting
People things
consent?
are complex. I mean, I have a
Yes.
lot of tools in my tool belt. It depends on the situation, of course. If the person feels comfortable with me, but then not with somebody else,
Mhm.
then it's harder too. But I find half the time, if they just process their thoughts with me, then they can think critically and what they want to do, who they want to talk to next, how they want to approach the problem, and then they're more effective already. That is a direct outcome. It's tricky a
Time.
little bit sometimes if I'm doing coaching and it's like private, I'm not going to share what we talk about, which I do by default. And then somebody else sometimes asks, well, you have to tell me what you talked about. I'm like, that's not how I work, because if I didn't, they knew I would tell the CTO everything, they wouldn't share it with me and it wouldn't work. So like, that's kind of tricky. So there has to be trust, and the people have to see, oh, well, he did talk to this person and then they changed their behaviors and they said it was very effective and helpful. And so I'm going to believe those two things without getting my nose into all the details.
How do you establish your authority? It sounds like that's a very difficult, like, are you a consultant? Are you part of the team? Are you like a nanny that comes along and sort of helps everybody feel good? A
It's funny. I
concierge?
do think of myself as Mary Poppins in some ways, but not really a nanny. But I like to come in and help and leave. I want to help equip people with the skills. I'd rather teach someone like a manager how to listen to their employees well, and then they can do it without me. And I'm willing to just listen to the employees directly to get the ball rolling and show that it's effective and show them that they should be doing it. I definitely come in as a coach.
Feels like hospitality and care, high priority for you, at least in the way you work.
Yeah, it's very people-centered, because that's often the biggest problem that there is. It's just, a lot of people don't believe in it, and that makes it hard to get hired sometimes. But if people are having these kind of relationship issues and trust issues, they usually know it very clearly. And if I say that I can help improve the trust on the team, then sometimes that's a great match client, and then we work together well.
So they know it. So that knowing is a measurement that they have done for themselves. Is it fair to say that they know it but don't communicate it openly until they find a new job?
Maybe, yeah.
Is that a common theme?
Until they get into a safer environment, either changing this one to be safe or changing,
going on vacation or change some
that can
change.
help some. Yeah. So sometimes I draw a graph of like how happy you are at work, like 0 to 10, and then it changes over time. And if you're very happy, you'll stay in the job, of course. And if you're very unhappy, of course, you'll leave. Most people are in the middle, and it's changing. And a vacation maybe can get you from about to leave to barely staying, sure, but it might not get you to very happy. And I want to help people get from the awkward middle to the very happy area.
That sounds like something you like doing, that charting.
Yeah, I graph a lot, very visual.
Are there any patterns on your, are the math question first, are all of the charts two-dimensional?
Well, two-dimensional charts are easier to explain and draw. There's fewer factors. But I'll give you an example that's not. When I do decision making and I have to get like 8 people on the same page on a decision, like which project should we staff, a big decision, then I have them do a matrix. So it's like what options we have are rows and what decision making criteria are columns. And we go through and we talk about every cell. And often the engineers will be like, this one's going to take us longer to engineer, then this one will be quick. And then someone like the product manager will say, this one is what users need more, and this one they need less. And, like all these different variables. And once we get through that process, the numbers don't matter that much, but people like seeing the numbers. And you can tell which option is the best based on the criteria we agreed to. And people feel heard and understood, and they feel like their perspective got it. And the engineer can point right there. That's what I said. That 5 out of 5 right there. And I see the rest of the context, and I guess I'll go with the decision. Sure, yeah. People get aligned.
With the titles you've used, VP of Engineering, the C-suite, maybe there's a CIO, COO, it implies a certain size of organization. Does this work for smaller startups as well, for small and medium business companies?
Yeah. So some of these, like, I don't know that I would get 8 people in on a decision-making thing if they don't have 8 people on the team, because we don't need that number. But if there's even just like 2 founders of a startup and they aren't agreed on which direction to go to, the matrix is still a great tool for that. So they can talk about what do they value. Even just this week, I'm doing this with a client, and I got different perspectives from each person in the room, what they're thinking about, and just getting it out in the open and clearly communicated means we can move forward with alignment instead of moving forward with like somebody getting their way and somebody not. And then that produces what I like to call turbulence, where the thing comes up again and again and again because it's not resolved and we didn't spend time to resolve it.
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Another pattern I see a lot is people say, we don't have time to spend a few hours on alignment. We're too busy. And then what they get instead is way more than a few hours in turbulence over the course of the year or 2 years or whatever. Even over the course of a month, there could be more turbulence than directly addressing it. So that's another challenge I have as a consultant, is when a team knows they have a turbulence kind of problem that there's not resolved, there's not alignment, but they're not willing to make time or space for it. I don't know. There's no quick answer there. But if I can do it with them on a smaller scale thing and they see the value of it, then I can help them do it on a larger scale thing, get more people involved. So it's like a gradual trust building thing.
Okay, so it sounds like not only do you struggle with the emotional obstacles that the people you're working on, to put it bluntly, but there's also the skepticism of the person who hires you. So there needs to be some
I don't know that I would even call it skepticism. If they're hiring me, they generally trust me, but it's like priorities and budget. And should we prioritize getting alignment on this thing, or should my employees just do what I say because I'm in charge? And that's maybe that's really a cultural smell, that they're probably more power oriented than collaborative. But it's very common. A lot of big organizations are very like top down, top driven. And there's a disjoint between the people with the context who are doing the work day to day, the IC, individual contributor employees, and the people who can make the decision-making power. And if those are in different spots, that's a problem. then not the best decisions will be made. But if the right people with the context are making the decisions because you trust your employees, then way better decisions are made. It's like a new stratosphere of effectiveness for the company. But most people aren't working in this space of organizational development. They haven't compared many organizations. They don't see these patterns. And they're like, no, we just need to get this thing done for the client. They're kind of short-sighted. And I don't blame them. They don't know. They don't have this skill. They don't have this vision, this ability to see these things. And it's my job as a consultant, not just to know best practice, bring them in and suggest them and tailor it to the org, but also to communicate it to all the right people. And that can take a lot of time too.
So how do clients find you? What problem is a good problem to call you in for?
I love it. Good question. I guess it's two questions. One is people often find me at conferences. I talk at a lot of conferences, or from referrals is the biggest two. And they notice like some of the content I'm sharing, like you should validate someone else when you're talking to them. That's a common workshop I give. They say, oh yeah, some of my coworkers need to validate me more. So they feel it personally, I could use this so I could be happier at work and it would make the team more effective. And then
have that mirror,
like somebody who's an advocate who really gets it, then they have to talk to other people and get the other decision makers on board. And then they need to frame it in a different way, maybe like, this business goal that we have, we need to focus on it. And one of the best ways is this thing that I have in mind. So like they have to map it from the other person's perspective. So I often get an advocate from somewhere who then tries to bring me in.
Within the company?
Within the company, yeah.
Okay. Is it fair to say that that's usually an HR person?
Actually, no. It's like most often an IC engineer who just sees that problem on their team, or sometimes like it's usually in the tech org, because I'm going to tech conferences. So HR people aren't usually attending those. So it's like someone in the engineering org. Sometimes it is HR. It happens too. Yeah. Okay. The other question you just asked was, how would someone know if they need my services?
Yeah. What's a good problem to come to you from?
Yeah. If two executives are disagreeing a lot and there isn't alignment on the company direction, that's a good one to bring me on. I can do like relationship coaching, which is a lot like in therapy, couples counseling. I use a lot of the same techniques, but in the business context, and I know all these different tech roles. I know what's going on in the org. I can follow it. And I don't know, that's not stressful for me because I'm helping them process their feelings, and it's like a skill I've developed. So that's a big one. If executives aren't agreeing on things, or leaders at whatever level, maybe like the CTO and their peers aren't agreeing on things, that's a great spot to bring me in.
Disagreeing on things. The question implies that there can only be two choices. In my experience, especially in the tech world, when two people disagree, there's usually three choices. We do what you want, we do what I want, or we do both with half effort. So there's this dilution of focus, and parallelism jumps in. So you go away from collaboration and you go to a team of 5 people working on five things on parallel. Is that perhaps to me, that seems like a signal. Are there any signals that you picked up on how to spot that this is happening at the top with a signal from the bottom?
Yeah. One way it shows up is if the direction changes every 6 months or something. Like, oh, well, now we're going to focus on this user segment. And then 6 months later, oh, user segment B instead. And then we go back to A. And that can be a good strategy if everybody is talking about it and strategizing, collaborating well. It's not a bad thing. But if it's like random and you stop mid-project, you're like, well, why are we stopping this mid-project right here? And why is this always happening? That's probably from executive misalignment. They haven't chosen a direction to go in. And they like trade off who gets to run it, I guess, based on who gets tired. Maybe is one factor. Somebody was running it and I don't know. A lot of scenarios could lead to that.
So that's like a compass just spinning in circles.
Yeah.
Just this way, that way, this way, that way.
That's a great image for this. I love it. I imagine like Scooby-Doo cartoon style.
Okay. So that's one big ship moving in a haphazard way. What about the 10 small ships moving in different directions? The parallelism aspect. How do you spot that? What is that indicative of?
The leaders often see if one team is doing something completely different from the rest. Usually they're focusing on like the one that's most misaligned. That's what's on their mind. And then their question to me is, how do I get this team to do what I say? And they don't say it quite that bluntly. But that's kind of like the essence of it.
That's what they
And
want.
then I turn
That's what
around
they
and
think they want.
yeah. Like we know what we're doing. We've set the direction and they need to follow it. And so then what I want from both of them, both sides, it's like the two different people. I want the employees to learn about what the intended direction is. So the leadership needs to share the vision and why and what they've considered and all the alternatives and like include them in the discussion. And the leadership needs to understand what these employees are seeing, the ICs and the team members. What do they see that we're not seeing? Because they probably have some critical information, context that the leadership is missing. And so really like they both need to come together. What I see most often is the employees are interested in that some amount, and then the leadership isn't making time for it. They're too busy. And then, oh, if you're too busy to address this problem, maybe the problem won't get fixed.
I picked up on, sorry. I picked up on an example you used. You conflated vision with direction. If I add the terminology of next step and like midterm goals and destination and journey, how would you rebalance those? Which is which?
I suspect in this scenario, the team's not aligned to what the leadership wants them to do, that they don't have a clear view of the vision even. Like the 5-year, 10-year, where they want to get to long term.
The vision being the direction or the destination?
The destination.
The destination.
I like your vocabulary here. Yeah, very more nuanced. Yeah, I don't think they have a shared image of what the destination could be even often. That's what I see the most. And then it's easier to talk about the direction as long as they agree on the destination. Then the direction, the path, how to get there is easier to talk about generally. I mean, it's still hard. It still takes a lot of work, but there's like at least something foundational they share in common.
I'm sorry. You have
timing.
Yeah,
there's
you
probably
have
just
timing.
half a second lagged.
Yeah.
And that makes us overlap our speech. Sorry. Me too.
When you say direction, in my mind, that's next step. But from your example, it does feel like you're using a more midterm approach to it. You know, in the same sense that maybe air distance is different from the road path you're taking. So is direction more the air, sort of the straight line distance between 2 points? Because
I like this visual map metaphor. This is really powerful. It's a good one. I guess I'm imagining, I mean, we don't always get to this, but I'm imagining, several paths, like Google Maps draws a route to get from A to B, and there's 3 options.
Yeah.
That's what I'm imagining. Like which route? Are we going to take route 10 or route 11?
And there are maybe some conditions on some routes. I'm not going to use
tolls, or
there's a speed limit or there's traffic.
Yeah. And the leadership doesn't know about the accident on route 10. They don't know it because they're not on the ground. So they're saying, we're doing route 11. Do route 11. Or they're saying do route 10 despite the traffic because they don't know it. And the team might be saying to do the other one.
I'm going to shatter that bubble because that's super easy to do on a map because, we have airplanes and we can sort of see where we're going. In software, it's often the case we don't see where we're going. That the future is a little bit... The near future is, let's say, murky. The far future is shrug, like you can project, you can estimate, but it's never going to be more accurate than the weather. So when we're doing this performance, to tie it back to the previous topic, when we're doing performance top-down, performance implying a shared expression of the vision, and bottom up, the psychological safety to be happy, to be heard, to voice your concern. There does seem to be a correlation of destination coming from the top and next step coming from the bottom. So vision versus autonomy. But in software, generally, vision coming from the top, so this is the destination, implies heavy waterfall. Is that we planned it out, we just need to figure out how to get there. But with agile teams, with the way the industry works, at least the average Joe interpretation of agile is that no, we are not focusing on the vision at all. There is no vision. Rather, we are going sprint to sprint, and there's some there's like a midterm 6-month roadmap. And the vision we replace with company values, or maybe company exit if it's a VC funded startup. How does your process change if I take away the destination and we have to focus on, like an infinite game of optimizing your route to somewhere?
I think we might have two different destination shaped things in mind. Maybe another metaphor for this is like the oasis in the desert, or like, I don't know, I want to go to Starbucks on the map example, Google Maps example. I want to get some coffee. I want to help the users with the coffee problem. And
actually, that's the destination. I want to experience drinking coffee. That's the destination.
Oh, cool. So I don't know, on software teams, I think there often is a destination like help users drink coffee. Like if that's the core,
Fair.
maybe you can get to a deeper value, like help them, I don't know, get their food needs. People need food. That's very deep. Of course, people need food. We can help them with that core need that they have. It's a core need. Coffee is not the one. Food is, and the coffee is.
Are you sure?
Oh yeah, I drink a lot of coffee too. But even then, like there could be a disjoint between people not wanting coffee in some country or spreading your market to, but your core goal is food. Maybe you'll do a cafe that doesn't have coffee. You'll just do tea in this country, if that's where you're going. And your goal, that's the unchanging part, is helping people get food, maybe. So there's like a core of it, and that doesn't change, and people can align to that. That's what I have in mind as the destination. Leadership has to have that.
That which doesn't change.
Yeah, the core of the vision, and then maybe the vision is described in terms of coffee, which I try to separate these two. Like, is it really coffee, or is it feeding people? And try to separate it out.
Yeah.
And locally, maybe it's coffee. Sure, so that's like what.
So is it the consuming side or the contribution side? I want people to buy my coffee, or I want people to experience the joy of drinking coffee. Right?
Yeah, right. And those are two. It's like profit for us or value for the users.
Output or outcome. Yeah.
I wish companies knew which one they prioritized, because they usually prioritize one over the other. I mean, ideally they do both anyway. They say they do both. That's true. But when there's like a decision point and it's like equal for either, which one do you pick? The better value or the more money? And some companies are very clear on it, and some companies, I don't know, pretend, and it's not very clear.
What about public companies, especially in the US? Don't they have a fiduciary responsibility to put the profit first?
Yeah, good question. And
or is it, or are when the company goes public, do the users of the coffee experience get replaced by shareholders? Or do they become then
like systemically? That's a huge pressure, and I'd say like that's the one that people feel beholden to the most. And if they can focus on the users anyway, it's like in spite of that pressure. So the system's designed for that. So I always wonder about B Corps, benefit corps in the US. I don't know much about them. I don't think they're as effective as I wish they were. People don't love them that much, but in that setup, at least, you're supposed to be focused on helping the users, like providing value to people, and that's part of your like bottom line. Maybe there's some tax incentive. I don't know what's going on, but if there is a form like that works, that would be really powerful. And then the company is supposed to do good. They have to do good. The system pressures are making them do it. But yeah, in the US, most of it, that's why people are complaining about capitalism so much lately. It's like profit beats out helping users every time, just systemically. And only some companies can succeed in providing value continuously despite the pressures. And that's just a shame. That's how we designed it.
So is that by design? It seems like IPOs are not the only way to fall into that trap. Can that happen as well with other forms? VC funding, startups.
For sure. They're all profit motivated too.
Where there's some disagreement.
I think a lot of startups, earlier stage companies, might have more user value focus, and they need it to get off the ground. So even if their goal is profit, they still have to focus on the value. But once they're big enough, they don't have to provide value anymore. Like
once they're big enough, they don't have to provide value anymore. It's a great quote.
Like the path to mediocrity is how I think of it. Every big company that has big enterprise level software, they haven't innovated anything in the past 5-10 years. It's been the same. Gmail is still Gmail. And there are a lot of upgrades other competitors have been introducing, but Gmail has slowed down. and they're not providing more value to users. Instead, they're just extracting profit from it. I don't know, every application, like Dropbox is the same. I don't know, Slack has been the same for a long time now, like not much innovation there. But when they were starting out, there was a lot of innovation. They were doing a lot of great changes. And so there's like I call it the path to mediocrity. As the company grows, they innovate less. They can afford to innovate less, and the pressures on them are such that they don't do it. They don't end up doing it.
Regarding innovation, we've now opened the door to creativity. We've talked about performance, happiness, effectiveness. I would love to hear your thoughts on creativity.
Yeah. One pattern that I've seen that kind of works is when a large enterprise corporation has an innovation arm, or like a department, or some teams are innovation, and they get evaluated separately. They have more freedom to choose things, and that can produce some innovation. But in the large companies, often the main teams evaluated by the main signals like profit or whatever have to just aim for profit, and they cannot aim for these user benefit things.
So that implies innovation is not profitable. So any entrepreneurial undertaking within like a company has to be.
Yeah, I don't think I believe that, but I think they can be profitable despite not having innovation. And it like calcifies. I think the innovation, some companies do it. Some companies continue to innovate when they grow, and they're more successful than the counterparts. I'm blanking on an example now, but there's so many that actually do continue being great until they get maybe sold eventually. It happens someday, it seems like Discord. I'm still very happy with Discord. Discord has not sold itself yet. It's still innovating. There's cool features every month. And they're still like doing well financially, as far as I understand it. And I just really, really hope they don't sell it to a big mega company that stifles all innovation. Because I think they're doing fine. I think they're doing great. And if not, I'm wondering systemically, like B Corps and all of that, like how can we help make things continue improving?
It sounds like this is something you're given a lot of energy, thought, and care towards. Is there anything more you would like to share on this topic?
Oh boy.
Some nuance that we can maybe open that I missed?
Yeah, I don't. There's another parallel to like, how do we change the government? And a lot of people like to focus on the national government passing laws for the whole country. But in that environment, I like to focus more on the local government. Can we do local changes and like start the trend happening? So I've been advocating for ranked choice voting in DC. Now I live in Maryland. I just moved a little bit away. And so it's the same in companies and businesses. That's often my approach, is to start on the smaller teams. It's easier to make change on. And if you
That's the
convert
bottom-up
one
approach.
one team to be happy and effective, and another team to be happy and effective, and a third one, that kind of changes the company. That's an easier change often than the whole company. I mean, I do the whole company changes also, but like it's both, and the one is way easier to do.
How much is you being an external person who comes in a factor to that?
I think there are a lot of benefits. Like people open up to me more than I think if I worked at the company and I'm the same person, because I don't have the skin in the game. Like I'm not committed to my project or whatever it is. People open up a lot more. Another one is I can say things easily and walk away. So sometimes I have to fire a client if they're stressing me out personally. That's not a great sign anyway. So I can walk away, and that's a powerful lever too. If I end up even just saying that I might walk away from a company, that itself might make change. And then the average employee doesn't have that comfort usually, that ability to just walk away if they're not happy with it.
And how do you charge them? Like this sounds like whenever so much emotion is involved, it sounds like it's very hard to then put that in a contract. So how do you make sure that it's fair and that everybody's protected?
So some of my contracts are like time and materials, hours, and maybe we decide a certain amount up front. But there's also clauses in the contract that say if something changes XYZ, we can end it early. They could end it, or I could end it. And anyway, if it's stressful for me, often it's because somebody is not happy with what's going on, what work I'm doing. Even if 80%, 90% of them are very happy, some are not. And I don't know, just that dissenter person might make it easier for us to end it early too. Or I don't know. I think I haven't had to do it so deliberately like this, but I could probably unilaterally just fire a client based on the contract that I've written. Like this is taking up too much of my time and energy. Goodbye. In the US, it's like at will employment is often the standard and the norm. And so it's like not surprising for someone like a consultant to have that ability to walk away. Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yes, I started adding those things in my agreements and contracts as well, just for peace of mind for both parties.
And also, like, I mean, I'm not walking away that often, thankfully, but often I can just go to the end of the contract and not renew, and that's kind of like walking away too.
Okay, makes sense. So
I like to do 3 months as like my go-to duration. I don't want to have to be around for 2 years. I don't want a long-term contract like that, and so much might change in the meantime. I like to focus more. Like 3 months is an amount of time I can make a change, a nudge to the company culture, but not too long that we're like bound to the current plan that we decided.
How does the relationship triangle happen? So I can imagine a boss hiring you to maybe help a manager he's having problems with. Is it usually helping the person who hires you, or is there more people involved? How many schemas can there be, and what's your experience?
It varies a lot. Often somebody who brings me on the decision maker, I call them, has like the ability to hire someone like me. So that's usually like CTO or VP of engineering, or sometimes a director might have that kind of budget. And then they have to get buy-in from the person who I'm helping. So if it's, I don't know, someone is for their direct report who's an engineering manager and they need the help. If they don't have buy-in, I don't want to work with them either, because it's not going to be productive. Yeah, it's a condition, right? So, and they have to set me up for success. That's something I've been working on this year, is requiring that their manager set us up for success before I accept even. And I think that they're generally willing, but they don't think to do it, or they didn't prioritize it, or if they're not comfortable, that's not a good sign anyway.
Yeah. And then you tell them this needs to happen or I walk away, and then they do it. And
that could look like talking to the engineering manager and saying like, oh, Casey's great. I know these things about him. I think you'll like him a lot too. And as your manager, you already know that I want you to work on this skill and you've agreed to it. And if that piece is missing, that's the setup that can completely derail a coaching. And then that might be coaching for their manager to help them deliver the feedback more effectively. But they're not always open to that either if they didn't see the problem up front.
Do you end up changing course a lot? Like you go in and then you figure out that, oops, this is one level too low?
Yeah, it changes all the time. And often like someone will change teams, or somebody will join or leave the company, and there's no way to predict that. So I'm happy to be as flexible as I can. I just want to help as much as I can. And so if we change the team that I'm focused on halfway through an engagement, I'm okay with that. If that's what makes sense, we have to talk about it. I don't just want to be reassigned without communication. That would be bad. But I'm happy to refocus.
You mentioned earlier, when you were mentioning the director of engineering, I'm assuming underneath the C-level, VP level structure, you said that they might not have the budget. Is it the type of budget, the size of budget? Like, are you really expensive? Are you bespoke? Is this a certain kind of training that they need to be exposed to?
I guess sometimes people think of it as training, and then they think this should be the HR budget, and then that kind of derails the whole thing. Once we're pulling in more variables, then that can come really.
Because then you compete with conferences.
Yeah, or it's just another step. And I don't even think that it's a blocker, but the fact that the director has to talk to HR, and then they need to talk to somebody else, and then someone else has to talk, and then it can easily fall off the rails at any step of that. So especially sometimes I offer workshops. So if I'm doing a workshop on explicitly validating your coworkers, the director of engineering is like, great. And this guy will have engineering metaphors that my team will like. All right, HR, can you pay for it? It's a training, of course. And then I don't know, and it goes off the rails because of that. But if it's coaching, often the director does have a coaching kind of budget, a personal development budget for their people. And that goes much smoother.
That has been my experience as well, as a coach. Would it be too uncomfortable for you to maybe share some of your price ranges for like, do you do big, small, medium? Like, what can people imagine? What's a good fit?
Yeah. I guess I don't want to share specific prices because they're changing all the time. And when someone watches the video in a year, I don't want to be held to it.
Fair enough.
I do sometimes project-based pricing for something like the organizational assessment that I know how long it will take. I'm going to do X interviews, and I can calculate that all up front. And I prefer project if I can do it. But then for guess another type is workshops. That one is set per workshop. That's very straightforward. And then for coaching, it's like an hour package bundle. Then I guess it could be ad hoc hour, but usually I'm full. So if you want me, you have to have the package bundle to reserve my time. It's kind of like a retainer, I guess.
What does it mean that you're full? Like, are you constantly coaching companies all the time, or are you doing all the projects and it's sort of many facets of Casey?
Yeah, I guess both. I'm also full energy-wise often. Like I can only emotionally do the emotional burden of so many groups of people and individuals and still be effective, fully effective. It is time. Like often my week is so full, but I don't do client work 100% of the time, of course. It's not even necessarily 50% of the time, and then I'm full. It's like 40% maybe. Because I do things like, I don't know, marketing, going to conferences, being on podcasts, things like this, business development. Another thing I'm doing lately, I'm actually taking this month off as much as I can without canceling in progress work. I'm not taking new clients for a little while because I'm working on an online course for my book, Debugging Your Brain. I just need some downtime away from people. So I have some solo kind of work to do that's related to my business.
So I did some research and I found something Casey's preparing on a platform called Luma. Is that the thing you're working on?
Luma is like Eventbrite, but like more modern. They've innovated. They're a lot better and shinier and simpler than Eventbrite. I love Luma. What did you see on Luma?
You had some program there, or I found an old page of a program there.
Yeah, the one I did last week was on strategy. I was doing a research project for myself and for the people who are attending, like how do people think about strategy? So there's a lot of books on what makes good and bad strategy, and I've read a bunch of them, but I want to know what do average people think? What are like the 5 different ways people think about strategy? Like strategy and tactics is one people bring up all the time, or the map kind of metaphor, the destination is another way. And so it was a great interactive workshop. We had breakout rooms, people shared their perspectives. We tried to group words like card sorting style, and I might do math to this kind of data and see what people think. I'm like really approaching this like a social scientist. How do people think about strategy? Ad hoc?
Yeah, it sounds very much improv, some of it.
Oh, kind of, yeah. But I do this kind of workshop a lot where I ask questions and have people discuss it and then come back and share. That's like a really good pattern to get people really interacting with the material. And in this case, I didn't even have the material up front. I'm literally like, how do you think about strategy? That's the topic today. So I didn't even have like, here are the 5 ways people think about strategy. I don't have it yet. Maybe the next time I will, based on this workshop. Like here are 5 patterns I've seen. This is like a generative kind of event.
So you speak a lot about strategy, about inclusion, diversity, about emotional safety. By the sound of it, your workshops are very tactical, practical.
Yeah.
Or do you do any workshops which are more theoretical? Do you do any, or is that the reason for the book? How does this all tie in?
Yeah, I guess there's a space between theoretical research and like the real world and actually applying things. And in the middle, you could say that it's applied research. And that's the space that I'm in. I read a ton of papers. If you want to read the papers I'm reading in the empathyintech.com Discord, there's a research channel that I post a ton of papers in.
We'll link that.
I'm always reading this research. Great.
We need to do a follow-up on all the links we mentioned.
So many links. So I'm always reading papers, but I don't find it useful to do a presentation like, here's a summary of 5 papers I've read. I mean, I think that would be interesting. I would attend it. But for most people, and for like impact on business goals, and even for people to be happy at work, the research alone isn't great. So what I do instead is I have people practice. I bring a skill forward. I'm like, and there's data if you're interested. I have it in the notes if they really want to read the data like I do. But I don't talk about it as much as I can. I don't go into like the nerdy science details because that's not what's impactful. Instead, I try to do activities, which is often discussing things with people. That's like the real world application of validating someone else's feelings and thoughts. You can practice that on a real person, and that's more effective, and you're more likely to be able to do it again later. And I take a lot of inspiration from teaching things like dance. I've taught dance a lot, like swing and blues and choreographed dance, like Beyonce style. So I do like a lot of like arts things. And in those, you have to practice the dancing. You can't just sit there and, I don't know, watch a video about people dancing and then expect to be able to dance. You have to practice it. You have to actually move your feet with a partner in partner dancing. You have to have somebody else with you. So I'd use that kind of teaching model with getting a lot of practice, as much time as possible on the dance floor during the class. And then having people reflect on it afterwards. So like this is a pattern I do for all sorts of skills. I think I have 30 workshops. It's too many. I can't list them all. I love teaching.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It's so inspiring as well. My mom used to work as a teacher. So she was, for her entire career, she was a teacher at the same school, elementary school.
Yeah, my workshops also have like learning objectives. That's a thing teachers do right out. Oh, they're going to learn A, B, and C. It's like they're very skill oriented. Skill oriented.
Okay, so this is something you can finish. You can finish the workshop and you will pick up A, B, and C. To double back a bit on the papers you mentioned, there's a lot of data-driven, data-focused, paper-focused people who like to do decisions that way. With scientific papers, especially the ones in the social sciences, my experience has been, and the feedback I've been getting is, okay, here's that paper, here's the context, here's the control group, here is the conditions, this was the conclusion. It seems that X leads to Y. Reading the paper, how do I know that X leads to Y will also apply in my case?
Right? You have to do your own experiment. Is that what you expected me to say?
I don't know. Like, I want your, what I'm wondering on is, you now mentioned you should do your own experiments. How do I extract from the paper how I recreate that experiment under my conditions without causing trouble?
I'm having trouble imagining. What kind of trouble are you expecting here?
So let's say there's a paper on Dora metrics, which is one of the only papers now, or let's say, because that's a good example. Let's take a bad example. Paper on Agile or capital S Scrum increases productivity by 70%. And I'm like, that seems weird and fake. Okay, but how do I test that? We now do waterfall. Let's do an experiment, and then let's measure if it's 70% or how much is it for us. But it seems like that skepticism, or at least just doing it bottom up, might lead to disaster just because of the setup, because it might be a too short, too small, not including the entire vertical. So how do I know what the correct experiment is for the scale I am at, for the test I'm trying to run, just by reading a paper? What are the missing steps? Because it seems to be possible for all papers, this bridge between academic science and applied in the industry is possible. But for software, where it's like most of our papers are running on algorithms or AI, I mean AI predominantly now, or certain visual aspects or data management or data modeling aspects or cognitive science. Regarding happiness, well-being, organization, communication structures, how do you run experiments in like a company that's running towards a important goal?
Well, if you don't have space to run experiments, then you can't effectively run experiments. And a lot of companies are that way. You don't have the space for it. There's no time, or you're not allowed to do it. Or if you did, people will say, why are you doing that? Why are you being a weird team? And why don't you just be a normal, regular waterfall team instead? And if you don't have the space, I don't know, you can get away with some, but it's an uphill battle, and you can do it despite the system. But in a different type of org, a lot of them are like growth mindset. I know that's something you talk about a lot. If it's a more growth mindset team, then they're looking for experiments to try anyway. And I'd also want to start from, what are the team's pain points? Like the ones that come up in a weekly retro, like, oh, our CI pipeline is bad lately. Just to, I don't know, pick on that generic example. And then, okay, given that problem that we know we have, that we agree is a problem, here's an idea of how we can improve it from the research papers. It worked for them. Can we see if it will work for us? And to really tell, we have to have this much time, I don't know, do it for a month or 2 months, or it's not a true experiment, we're not really doing it. Does everyone agree? Can we make up this space, make the time to do this full experiment? If not, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe you're not, because you might just disprove it kind of in people's minds, and that might be harmful. Like, oh, well, we tried it for one day and it didn't work. So never again. Like if you don't have the space, you might not even want to try that. Or you can do like small nudges, but not frame it as learning, I guess, and maybe get closer to it over time. Get an accomplice, someone on your team to tweak small things. And that works. I think if everybody did small tweaks, that's powerful too. But it's not the same as running an experiment that's visible and reporting the results to the team. That's a bigger, it's like a team effort instead of a renegade nudge.
So whether or not the experiment will be a useful tool is already predetermined by what the company culture is to begin with.
Yeah. Is it a culture of experimentation and growth and learning? Or is it a culture of cogs in a wheel and you're just supposed to do what you're told? And I feel like most companies are cogs in a wheel style, or they lean that way. But that's not what is most effective or happy for employees. The learning, growing culture is like, there are papers on that we can look up too. The ones that are more collaborative and learning focused are happier and more effective.
So that's the bottom left quadrant in the chart that we drew earlier in the happiness and effective. That's the bottom left.
Not happy, not effective.
That's the not happy, not effective.
Yep. There's another framework that this reminds me of a little bit. Do you know Westrom's organizational types? Have you heard of that? It's in the Dora DevOps report.
That's in
like
Dora.
Google
web pages. That's where I saw it. Yeah.
Cool. Then the three are like power oriented, rule oriented, like bureaucratic, and then I call the third one collaborative. It's like more output focused. And that third one is the happy and effective one. The other two are less happy and less effective. And I'm not saying that some people probably prefer the power-oriented environment. They're good at it. They know how to do the politics at work, and they're comfortable there. And so an individual might prefer a different one. But for the overall team, most people in the company to be happy and effective, it's the third one.
For a, let's say, software developer who's watching this podcast now, who's going up in his or her career, what advice would you give them in regards to what to prioritize? A lot of what you bring to the table is not taught in school. And even if it was taught in school, the curriculum is way too old. It's like even stuff Facebook did 12 years ago is no longer current. So in 2022, for somebody who's targeting a 2023 step into management, team leadership, C-level, VP level, director level, engineering manager, well, what advice would you give them? What to focus on? Which way to do some things? More CI involvement, more management, less management, more leadership. Yeah. What advice would you give?
Good question. First, I want to take a step back from the role. The title engineering manager, it's a title, and that's different than a role. And most titles have several roles if you like decomposed it. So like people management is one role. Maybe like team lead. A lot of engineering managers also lead a project team, and like the direction of that, how that goes. I don't know. There's a lot of roles. We come up with a whole bunch of roles, and there's
that's the informal aspect
decomposing it.
Yeah.
And in some companies, an engineering manager's primary role is to be an individual contributor engineer. And if you have some time to manage the people, great. That's bonus. And I don't like that style as much.
I don't like this style either. I know some CTOs that do that. They seem to like it.
Some CTOs are primarily ICs still.
It's hard to get out of that.
It's hard. It's hard to shift. Yeah. I don't blame people who are doing that because that's the inertia. That's like the easier state to start at, but it's not the place I want.
But it's a limiting belief about the, crunch down on some problems.
Yeah, well said. But then the one that I think is the most important most of the time that gets missed is the people managing part. So if the engineering manager only does people management, if that's their only 100% of their time is helping the people around them be better, that's very powerful often. That has a huge impact on happiness and effectiveness of the whole team. And so at your company, you have to be clear, what kind of engineering manager do you expect me to be? An IC or a people manager or a team lead, and like you might have all three. I'm not saying like you can just have one necessarily. You're probably going to have multiple, but which one is the priority that you always get done? And which one is the lower priority you might help with?
So that's like a value structure almost. So
yeah,
reorganizing. Yeah.
And in most places, it's not clear. They haven't outlined this. They haven't documented it and described it. And if you ask people, say all of them, that's not a great environment for your success. And you're probably going to be evaluated on all of them, even though you can't spend equal time, or equal wouldn't be the best anyway. And anyway, getting clarity on what is expected of you from others, and what do you expect from yourself, and what does the team need from you, and like all of these different pressures on you. You have to be very clear on that. Sometimes I do this with people. I'll do the matrix spreadsheet. So like, what are the different variables that make you choose to do activity A, B, C, D? And I'm going to do it based on external expectations, my boss expectations, and what my team needs, and like all of these, and we can evaluate. And people feel like there's a lot of clarity from doing that kind of exercise.
Ty, my first guest on the podcast, who's also a good friend of mine, he, for his, what was it? University dissertation, I think. He created a project online called Odysseus, which is an online platform to do this kind of decision matrix.
Yeah, cool.
Is there any template, any decision matrix, or just a terminology from your workshops that you could perhaps publicly share with our viewers so that they could maybe self-evaluate to see if they're a good match to working with you?
Yeah, I love it. Good question.
All be
I
a good
have
start.
one blog post that touches on this on happyandeffective.com. But I don't have a template to share. But now that I have Gumroad set up as of this week, maybe I'll put my templates up on Gumroad. There's a free one, $0 one.
You wanna pitch it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I've also set up a a coupon code for anyone watching this podcast. It's at debuggingyourbrain.com/TNP, forwards you to the Gumroad, and you can buy the book and the audiobook at a discounted rate. There's only 10 coupons for people watching this, so the first 10 people get it.
I think we have live chat turned on, so I think I can
just go ahead.
Okay, can you send me the link right now, and I will just pop it into live chat, and the people in the live chat will see it first. I think that's a good incentive.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's fair.
Here's the link. Let me go make sure it works as typed.
TNP at the end?
Yep. Oh,
and
no,
what does
it didn't
TNP
work.
mean?
Oh, I think I typed it wrong. Of course. Doing it live. Oh, TTP, I think is the one. The Technologist podcast. I just made your podcast an acronym.
Okay.
And TTP works. There we go. Okay.
Okay.
Somehow I got the Technologist. I was like, oh, the first letter of Technologist is N when I typed it just now.
Okay, so it will be in the live chat or in the comments after the video, and I'm sure we can share it on LinkedIn as well, just after the broadcast. Yeah, I did. It didn't work for me, so it wasn't the right one. Debugging Your Brain. Is it HTTPS or HTTP? HTTP. I'm sorry. Yeah, HTTPS doesn't work. So.
Wow.
Doing it live. I'll do it without the HTTPS. There we go. I posted it. Casey, now coming back to the podcast.
And that's the book. I don't have the template that you were asking for yet, but if I do, it will be put there later.
Just as a short summary, what is the book about? What can people expect from the book? Who is it? Who should read the book? What's a good takeaway from the book?
So it's good for people who work in software, because the metaphors I use are software metaphors for the psychology concepts. But it's also accessible to people not in software. Like I explain what a function is in a sentence before using that example, and people tell me, I kind of understand a little bit more about programming now. Like it's accessible anyway.
Is it implied? Is it more solo, me and the computer? Or is it implied that I'm in a team and I have a product manager, leader /
Yeah, this book is a solo book. It's for you processing your own thoughts and feelings and articulating them and getting validation from others and getting support. And like, it's very concrete. It's very actionable. So there's activities at the end of every chapter that say, now go talk to a friend about this thing. Or it's like, go look through this chart of emotion words and figure out which ones apply to the situation. It's like a lot of very concrete homework. I'm going to make it an online course probably by the end of the year.
Okay.
And it fits really well to that because it's very skills based.
I would love to help you promote that. So
yeah,
once you have that, let me know. Okay. What else is I wanted to ask you one more question. How are you on time, by the way? Enjoying the podcast so far?
I have time.
You have time. Good. You
It's
mentioned
also an audiobook I want to mention. I
okay,
don't
go
read
ahead.
books very well lately, so I like made sure to narrate my own book and put it online.
So
So
that's the
if you
same book. That's Debugging
same
Your
book,
Brain, but in audio format.
yeah, yeah. And
Okay,
a lot of people I
narrated by
tell that to are
yourself.
like, thank goodness, because I wouldn't have read the written book. So I feel like I have to say that every time.
Oh, that's amazing. So we touched briefly on inclusion earlier regarding diversity, inclusion. How does that tie in? You said effectiveness and happiness is orthogonal. Where on that chart does inclusion fit and diversity?
Yeah. If the members of the team are included and we get their context and use that in the decision-making process, and there's alignment on all of those themes that we already talked about, people will be happier because they're being listened to and respected and contributing, and more effective because we'll have better decisions being made, having all the context from people. And then inclusion as a word, I like inclusion like the word generally really well, because you can be inclusive to minorities, which is how it's often used, but even inclusive to the members of the team who are like majority, like white men on software development teams is often the majority. And often the team members aren't included in the strategy that the leadership is making. So including even the majority people. And so if you want to have a diverse team, you have to be inclusive, maybe first of even the majority people is a first step for a lot of companies, and then of the minority people. And then if you're inclusive of them and the environment is happy and effective enough in that way, then you can actually retain diverse talent that you hire. So inclusion is often a first step. I would not suggest if your company has a toxic culture and everybody's stressed and leaving all the time, just hire more diverse people. That'll fix it. That's not true. You have to change the environment. I mean, really, you can do both. Ideally, you can do both and get a more diverse team and make it more inclusive at the same time. But just picking the one, inclusive can be on its own, but diverse can't necessarily be on its own, not effectively.
Casey, you opened up the topic of a toxic work culture. What is a toxic company, a company that has a toxic work culture? What are they not doing that makes them toxic?
Ooh, not doing. Have you read there's a great article by Sloan, MIT called Toxic Culture is Driving the Great Resignation. Have you seen that
I've
one?
seen that. I've seen that.
Yeah, I love it. It just resonates with a lot of my experience. It feels very true. What are they not doing? There's one chart from that article. I'm pulling it up now. It's short-term steps for companies to increase retention. It's pretty good. It's in line with what I'm thinking too. With some things companies aren't doing that would help retain people and make them happier or more effective in their company is like letting them change their position, lateral career opportunities. So when I was working at Heroku, I really wanted to be a product manager, and I was being a product manager without the title and without the authority that came with it for a year or two, and I never managed to change. And then I left the company. Sorry, company. I would have been much happier if I had been able to stay there and change roles. I would
Mind
have
if we
learned a lot of,
stay on this topic for a bit?
yeah.
So, in my experience coming up as a leader, my first experience with leadership was that toxic example that you didn't like, that you mentioned you don't like, whereas I was an IC and then I was an IC and 10% of the time I got to sit on meetings and report on performance. And I hated that part because I wanted to coach and mentor, but I just didn't know how to bridge that gap because it was handed to me like that on a plate. But then as I changed jobs, I realized that the best kind of leadership that I excel at, that I'm productive at, and that I can contribute the most to the team, where their contribution outweighs my IC contribution, my individual contribution, is when I can leverage informal authority. So what you just mentioned, the example, so lateral movement is the ability, and correct me if a nuance, please. I want to get the terminology right. So lateral movement that would make people happier is the ability to leverage their informal authority, their informal roles, and formalize it.
Yeah, that's one way to do it. And I might call that like job crafting or role crafting. Like this person has these 3 skills and they want to use them and they would help the company. Let's let them do it.
But it sounds like it's exclusive. that you can either do A, B, or C, and that you had to, what did you have to let go of to be more product?
Well, I mean, I had to leave the company because they would forbid me from having that title for some reason. Anyone was not allowed to do a lateral change. I was hired as a front-end developer, and I would always be a front-end developer. Actually, I did manage to be an engineering manager there.
That's a
So, like,
common, yeah.
this path is allowed, and this path lateral to PM is not allowed in this company, which hurts the company in a lot of ways. And everybody agreed, even the person who rejected that move in the end, they agreed this would be good if we did it, but we don't.
I think
We're
that
a
is
big
by
company.
far the number one reason why people leave companies. I've seen it so many times. Even I've left companies for that very reason, where I said, well, okay, we're making changes. At least let me like include me, let me help, or at least let me move sideways.
Right. And in the HBR, not HBR, in the Sloan MIT article, it was the number one that like impact one that you can do short term. I think that's a policy change. The company could change that policy just like immediately. It could take effect tomorrow. And a lot of other cultural changes are slower. You're affecting a lot of people and how they perform their duties day to day. It's slower. This is a quick one if you can get it to happen.
Quick and effective. But it doesn't sound like this is on the effectiveness spectrum. Is this happiness or inclusion?
Well, retaining employees, I think, is
no, the lateral movement. Lateral movement.
Yeah, lateral movement. So a lateral movement helps you retain employees, which, and if they're happy staying there, that's like a big plus. Retention is very related to happy and effective.
Absolutely. Because then people, their coworkers, their peers also stick around longer, so you don't have that sinking ship.
Stay there.
Yeah. Okay.
There's they have the knowledge of the domain knowledge, the context. That helps them be more effective in their new role as PM or whatever.
Continuing on that topic of toxic work culture, the reason I asked you from the negative side is that, people always talk about, oh, this is toxic, I'm gonna leave. It's toxic. The terminology implies it's toxic, so I'm gonna leave. It implies that it is toxic because there is something that made me leave. And I think this is a very unconscious bias that we communicate. So I didn't want to approach it from that direction. It's not, a toxic work culture is not such that people want to go. So retention is a output, not input. So what are the inputs that are missing that make a toxic work culture toxic, that lead down the toxicity path?
Yeah,
that was my intention with that, with the phrasing, really.
Got it. So this reminds me of the talk I gave, culture smithing, and even just that word is maybe an answer. Culture smithing, like a lot of companies do deliberately do actions that change and form and shape the culture of the company. But most companies, I would say 95% that I've seen and talked to and worked with, they might say the word culture in meetings, but they're not doing actions to actively change the culture. Like maybe they think they see it, they kind of know they want it, but they're not taking all the action.
Passive.
It's passive, yeah. And it's because they don't know how to do it, or they don't have the bandwidth to do it. Maybe they don't have the skills. Maybe they're not empowered to do it. Like even the person at the very top, like the CEO/founder person, might not feel empowered to do it because they're expected to do XYZ from other people. And so how can we change the company to this growth mindset so that they can deliberately work on the culture?
So how do I differentiate the two negative scenarios of the work culture is becoming toxic because we are not doing culture smithing versus we are doing culture smithing badly and that's why it's toxic? So how do you navigate this?
I don't know. I haven't seen the second one so often. I'm sure it does happen sometimes for culture smithing. We're trying to be more bureaucratic, but people don't say that so literally.
But maybe culture smithing is, we want to be professional. We're gonna adopt Scrum by the book. We're gonna have formalized titles.
True. That has happened. Yeah.
That sounds like culture smithing. Just it's just toxicity about to happen, and people can measure that. People can sense, we're doing that corporate thing that nobody likes. Maybe it's time I start looking for a new job. So that's an example of the second. Have you ever seen the second, this scenario now?
Yeah, it happens a lot. But I don't know that I would use the word culture smithing. Language is hard.
Yeah.
When I'm saying culture smithing, it's like looking at the problems you're experiencing and addressing those. But the Scrum example is like, we found a solution and we're just going to apply it here and hope it fixes everything.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
And that
solution driven
hope,
and not
is the problem.
well, again, it's like being solution driven instead of problem driven. If you start with the solution, oh, we just need to adopt Scrum, that'll fix it. Whatever it was, we didn't talk about what it was yet. But if you talk about the problem first, like, oh, we're not delivering on time, what options do we have to think about? And if you consider multiple options, it's also like strategy versus a plan. You can make a plan and call it a strategy. A lot of people do. Or if you consider multiple different plans, multiple paths, and then evaluate which one makes the most sense for us, and then choose the best one. And if a company is doing that and they still chose Scrum, I'd say they're culture smithing, and it might actually have been the best choice if they're really considering, and if they have all the right voices in the room, if they're including the perspectives of ICs, and then they still choose Scrum. Sometimes that is the best choice. Maybe the other options were worse, and they're constrained in some way.
For them.
I'm thinking like government consulting, government contracting. I worked in the government for a while. Maybe I have to deal with government things and doing our process similar to theirs. I don't like it overall. It's not the most happy and effective given for our team, but maybe there's something there that forced us to. And so I'm not going to write that off as a bad option. But the culture smithing in my mind is like being strategic about it, considering many possible options and evaluating them. But in your example, it's just like, we have to do Scrum time. So it's like one solution. We did not consider the alternatives. And then that's not culture smithing by the way I use the word.
What is, I feel like we didn't get to the core of that question. Just let me rephrase.
Sure.
Your answer was great, but it opened up more doors than I can juggle right now. So regarding work culture, let's put it this way: that there's some easy metrics. Some people are being coached, consulted, especially with the LinkedIn and the YouTube narrative of don't go to school, do a boot camp, or don't go to school, go to Google's Academy program. They have like UX, product manager stuff. They have those like 6 months, 12-month degrees, or even I think they're becoming like university, like educational facility pillars in the US, at least accredited. So with all that advice, conflicting advice, and all that choice, and all those YouTube videos, and all the coaches, the mentors, what is there a common theme? For somebody who's torn between DevOps, full stack, front end, back end, manager, UX, product, ninja of some kind, sales, technical sales, recruiter. The common theme seems to be DevOps, organizational methodologies, Scrum, testing, communication, soft skills. Where would you put focus for like an individual coming into a work culture, knowing that it's 50-50, maybe it's toxic? What should they focus on to not learn the bad stuff from a toxic work culture?
Oh, yeah. I think maybe the best like resistance antidote is if you can have a lot of support from people, including outside of the company. So you can, if you say, oh yeah, we have every morning meeting recorded, then someone at another company can say, that's weird. And you get that sanity check. So having perspectives from other people. So the people that end up attending meetups and conferences and they have those connections, I think, are more often aware of when a culture is toxic because they have reference points.
That's really interesting, because now as a coach, now as a consultant, I see this and I can see, wait guys, that's like the way you just spoke to each other. That's really, that's really weird. Like, it like closes a lot of doors, which I didn't see, starting off in my career as a developer. I just took it for granted that I'm not going to be consulted. I'm not going to be included on certain decisions.
Right.
I'm not allowed to talk to the people in that room when they're having that meeting about that important stuff that affects me. And that was very difficult to navigate, because the alternative was I complain or I go find another job.
Right.
Um,
And there's a lot of nudges you can do as an IC if you know about them. Like
a
when I give the
nudge.
culture smithing talk, I have a
Yeah.
list of like 40 small things an IC can do to change the culture in a small way. And one of them is like, you can ask your grand boss for a one-on-one. You're allowed. I mean, maybe in some cultures it's not allowed. Maybe it's shunned, but most of the time, no, there's nothing said about it, no policy. If you ask, they'll be like, oh, well, I guess so, since they asked. Like, I don't know, you can get an audience with this person. And that's helpful for information transmission in the organization. It's helpful for you. It's helpful for them. They get more context. It's like, but no one told them that they're allowed to do it if it's not the norm at the company. That's called skip level at a lot of places.
Yeah.
People do skip level every month or two or some pattern. And just knowing it's possible, giving people that word. A lot of people told me after the talk, like, I've never heard of a skip level, and now I'm going to try it. And some people even did and told me, I tried it and it was great. Good idea. So like, how can people pick up these 40 things if they're not talking to others?
Can you share anything else? Did this seem super useful to anybody starting off or already is a few years or maybe a decade in their career? What else could you share, like tactical stuff?
Yeah. Just on the one-on-one path, there's more. You can have one-on-ones with your people on your team. You can have one-on-ones with people in your role and other teams. You're generally at most companies, you're allowed to talk with people about your work and bond with them. And that's it's powerful. Another one for remote teams is having water cooler space. Like having a channel for sharing cat photos or sharing video game discussion. Like I'm playing the new, I don't know, whatever game.
Like a hash random channel.
Hashtag random is the great. And some companies I've learned don't have a hashtag random. Like they removed it, even though it's a default. And there's no space to share personal, job irrelevant things for social bonding. And that hurts the team's cohesion as a team. Like they don't know each other, they don't trust each other as much if they don't have this water cooler space. There's a psychology word for that. It's propinquity. It's the more often you see someone naturally, the more like kinship you feel toward them, the more you like the person. So your neighbor you live next to, you've never seen them before. They're physically close maybe, but you do not have high social closeness, social incidental.
What is the opposite of that? When somebody has a facade or like a visage of...
I guess low propinquity would be the opposite of high propinquity. It's like, I've never interacted with that person. I have no idea who they are. But that person who shared that cat GIF, and then I liked it with an emoji, we had an interaction that's a little bit more social closeness naturally, with a space for it, and happened. And I wouldn't say that if you schedule a one-on-one, that's not necessarily propinquity. It's like the natural ability, like a lunch. It
opens the door.
Events.
It creates the potential.
Yeah, the potential happens there.
Okay. What are things, perhaps anti-patterns, rituals that people might be forced into or maybe do unconsciously that prevent propinquity?
I guess like forbidding non-work stuff. Like one friend's company, they had a hashtag hi channel on Slack, and then somebody tried to remove it. In hi, you can only say hi, H-I. You're not allowed to say
just
anything
hi.
else.
Oh, I see.
And that creates a lot of propinquity too. The people who think this is silly and they do it, then you feel kind of camaraderie with them. And then somebody in charge was like, this is a waste of resources. And everyone's like, what? It doesn't cost money for a channel. What are you talking about? Thankfully, somebody advocated to keep it enough to persuade the person not to shut it down. But like, that's an anti-pattern. Shut down every social space in the company. That would be a terrible anti-pattern.
And how do you recover from that?
I don't know. Ideally, the person who shut it down has an epiphany. They see it, they understand it, and they say, that was a mistake. That would be the strongest way. And that would encourage people to create more in the future. Or if somebody else can reinstate it anyway, and it's still like hesitant to make more space like that. I'm not going to make the counting channel where you do an incremented number every time you post. Someone posted 5, now I post 6. I don't know. If the culture is discouraging this kind of thing, then I'm not going to make counting. But like if the discouraging person, I don't know, changes their mind publicly, that's very powerful to recover from the culture. Or if they leave, but then we still need someone else to say, to encourage it again, to like inflate this ability from where it was on the ground.
Because it does happen that you do something, somebody gets reprimanded or it gets forbidden, and then the leader leaves, but the damage was done because now the culture is now self-censoring to avoid that behavior, even though they don't know what caused it in the first place. There's
another diagram I draw a lot, which is like how permitted is something. Like in the middle, it's like passive. On the
Mhm.
left, it's like discouraged or forbidden, and on the right side, it's like allowed, permitted, or encouraged, actively encouraged.
Mhm.
And so where is this social norm? This is a social norm plot, like a social rule. We are not allowed to have social channels. It might be in the forbidden part when they said it, but then they left and maybe it moves over to the discouraged.
Mhm.
And then on the y-axis, I like to do how explicit it is. So it was explicitly forbidden when they were here. And then we move it down to
Mm.
implicitly discouraged is what, like where people's sentiment is. And
Mhm.
how do we move it over to encouraging it?
Explicitly, yeah.
Mhm.
That's really
So
interesting.
often it's
That's
like a
really
U
good.
shape. Often it could just teleport sometimes. It's not like necessarily a path, but often it goes down, it becomes less explicit, and then we can make it implicitly the opposite again. That's like a pretty common path.
Is there any aspects of the KC that we didn't touch on? We're sort of slowly winding down to the dramatic curve of the podcast. So if there's anything we didn't touch on that you would like to, that would be a good time.
What a good question. I don't know. We talked about a lot. Do we have any notes for this?
Yes, you have the notes that I shared with you.
Good, good. I guess I can plug my business a little bit. That's something I'm always very shy to do it. So my
That's a good way
consulting
to reach you.
company is Happy and Effective. happyandeffective.com. You can email me, Casey@happyandeffective.com if you're interested. I do workshops. I do a lot of this coaching and the organizational assessment we talked about. And I'm actually full for a while. I'm probably not accepting clients until January. But I have some openings then. If you think it would be interesting to bring me in to help your company, probably you should reach out now to get me for January. And I'm happy to work on that kind of thing. Another couple of services I've been doing lately are coaching product managers to help them learn in context on the projects that they're doing, some skills that they haven't picked up otherwise. And I don't know, I have a lot of techniques that I don't think are taught in the boot camps. I've taught at like General Assembly before, and a lot of my techniques aren't in there. I don't know.
Awesome.
But I'm full. Sorry, everybody who thinks this is interesting.
Is there anything that people can buy from you that wouldn't require your lifetime? Is there any videos, any recordings of you perhaps sharing or upskilling?
I have a YouTube playlist of a lot of conference talks. So I'll share that after the talk. I have to go dig it up.
Please do.
I've also been on a lot of podcasts. So I have a podcast playlist if you want to hear more of my ideas. A lot of new ideas came up today with you, Dennis. It's been awesome. Like I'm going to listen through later and take some notes and maybe draw some new diagrams based on what we said. And then one more thing I haven't done yet is I will have a teachable course, like an online learning platform like Coursera kind of thing for debugging your brain that's interactive with a group workshop. And I'll post that on Twitter and LinkedIn. So if you're interested in that, I recommend following me on those. That's where I'll share it. And you'll hear about it whenever that's ready.
I saw you're posting a lot on Twitter. Can we share your Twitter handle as well?
Yeah. Here it is. I sent it to you in chat.
Hey,
Casey, what's up?
That's your Twitter. And you're very active. I saw you're very active.
Twitter is where I go the most. If I ever have a thought, I just post it to Twitter.
Okay, so
LinkedIn gets half of my posts, like half of them.
So until January, you're still available on Twitter for the very least.
That's true. Yeah. Send me articles, ask me questions. Okay. I'm very there. Another place you can find me is the Empathy in Tech Discord. You can message me there, ask me questions there. We have a lot of events.
What's a good way to join that Discord? Is there a link perhaps that we could share?
empathyintech.com. That has a link to join the Discord and the mailing list for the events. And we usually have an event once a month. We're a little slower in the summer lately, but we're going to pick it back up again eventually.
You say we. Are you affiliated with them? Are you the organizer of?
I'm one of the founders. Andre and I founded it together, and we have a few more organizers, Katie and Nyota, that help run things lately.
Amazing.
It's a big community. It's been up for a year or two. It's been a while, Empathy in Tech.
Awesome. Casey, I think this is a wrap. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
All the contribution you brought.
We have a lot in common. We have a lot of common ground to talk through these things. It was really rich.
I think our core values overlap a lot, and which is perhaps a good conversation for next time. Casey, thank you. And to our viewers, thank you very much. We're on YouTube now. This is the first one on YouTube. So this is the premiere of the podcast. If you want to help us with the algorithm, click subscribe, the bell, all that jazz. Follow us on LinkedIn, and see you next time. Thank you.